The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm joined here with Greg. And you know what? Over the time that me and Greg have gotten to know each other, we're really like brothers now.
Yeah,
But,
we are.
Greg, don't get any weird ideas.
I will try not to. Dave, I was thinking about taking this on from a different angle, and as we get through October and we're entering the month of November, it's sort of a time to reflect on family.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely, right?
That's exactly what we're going to do here in this episode.
Absolutely. This is a very family-oriented episode, which, Thanksgiving and all that is in November, obviously. So the month is all about family.
Closeness. And maybe sometimes families get a little too close.
Yeah.
And that could be a problem. And that brings up today's interesting episode. Inbreeding, incest, I guess, right?
Yeah. I would just like to start off this episode by telling everyone this is Greg's idea.
Yeah, I knew you had to say that. We can't go in this together. this has to be my strange fascination with inbreeding, which has followed me around my entire life.
What?
I'm telling you right now.
Inbreeding's followed you around?
No, I haven't. So I remember hearing or maybe watching a horror movie or something. I've had this fascination with like Appalachia, and not that I'm not saying that everyone there is like inbreeding or they should, or that's even a fair assessment of that area, because it's not. But there is some stuff there, which we'll talk about. But I remember when I was in the Navy, everyone was leaving. Some hurricane was coming, and my friend lived in Kentucky. He's like, who wants to come to Kentucky with us? And I was like, oh, I'll go, because I've heard of like stories of inbreeding are in like that part of the country. And he's like, actually,
so you're like, I got to check it out.
I got to see this. Right. And he's like, I don't really know anyone who's inbred, but I mean, you can come. So I did. And I didn't run into anything, but it was a fun trip.
That you know of.
That I know of.
And we'll get into why I say that later.
That's right.
But Greg, I have to say this. Okay. It is funny watching you give the intros to episodes, because you do it in like a coy, like, I'm going to do a build up and then tell you what the topic is. But I think you forget that when people listen to this episode, they see the topic right in.
Not lost on me.
They have to press play. They see the topic name.
There was a time where that was lost on me, but it so happens that I like you do another podcast, and this same thing has been brought to my attention, because I do like to do the coy, wrap around the topic before we say it. But let me tell you something. There's a couple things I want to say here. There's a couple motivators here for in the way I think about it, in my estimation at least. It's either to be far away from or get protection from power, abuse, oppression, whatever. Or it's kind of the opposite, right? To consolidate power and to keep power close.
Right.
Which is strange, right? Also, there's another part of this that, before we start getting into this stuff, which I thought that you might think is interesting. And it reminds me, it almost makes you believe in a curse. And like, follow me for a second, right? So you commit this moral, aberration. And, if this was hundreds of years ago, you're not thinking about the genetic, explanations for this kind of thing. So you're thinking, oh, I do this horrible thing where you almost know there's something intrinsically wrong with this. It just feels wrong. It's got to, right? And the way you're punished for it, it's not immediate. It comes out through your children, maybe your firstborn child, or at the very least, like your bloodline will be forever tainted.
Sure.
It's a curse.
Who told us originally? Like, who was the first person to tell us that, like, don't do this?
It's in the Bible, but it's got to predate that.
It was Moses. It was Moses, wasn't it?
It wasn't Moses.
Like,
it was in
Leviticus. Like every topic, it was Moses.
I mean, it was in the same pages that Moses exists in. I mean, it was in the Old Testament. But it's funny because like there's some biblical stuff going here, like the whole Noah situation where one of his sons quote
Was
saw his
on the-
nakedness.
What?
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. Like that's the whole
He was
reason.
just hot because he was building that ark and like he was sweating a ton.
No, he
It's
was
not a- it's
drunk
not a
and he was
big-
on the floor. And like either something
After building an ark, he has the right to get drunk and be on the
You're
floor,
right.
Greg.
You're
Why are you
right. And his son
judging?
doesn't have the right to look at him being all
Naughty.
naked on the floor. Oh, whatever happened. It's not quite clear what all happened in that situation. It's never really made clear. But that's the after Noah curses his son or his son's son, actually, which is interesting. That is the excuse they use for slavery.
Wait, that's not where I was talking. We're going. I was
Yeah.
it like connected a light bulb went off in my head and it connected something, and I'm like, oh, and then you totally threw
Yeah.
a curveball at me.
Yeah, and it's
those things don't seem to align.
why? Where was your light bulb going?
Inbreeding mutations, like he's putting a curse on future generations. Which,
No, I think that's something there for that. I think for sure there's something there.
Yeah.
He doesn't curse his son; he curses his son's son because
Right,
it does.
right.
Like we'll see, take a little bit of time.
when you look at my bits, that means you've been bad, and then I'm gonna curse your kids. Like,
Yeah.
it's a little extreme, Noah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we could even get into that later if we wanted, but that's a whole other kind of thing.
It's weird. I didn't know about that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's actually interesting the way people interpreted it because it's way off, obviously, and it doesn't make any sense. It's just they were just deceiving themselves to find something in the Bible that says, "Oh no, look, this horrible thing we're doing is fine." It says it right here in the Bible, and it's like, no, it doesn't say that at all. It doesn't say that at all.
Isn't that what they always do?
Yeah, that's what they do. That's the move. Everyone has their move for that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about inbreeding and where this was popular. And I want to start with royalty.
Of course. What you were saying, like you made the comment about consolidating power, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it does. It keeps power in the family for sure. And one of the most popular or well-known I don't know, cultures to participate in this is Egypt. Ancient Egypt. Who didn't love ancient Egypt? I remember in 6th grade, you get that huge book with just like Tutankhamun's head on it, and you were like, "Oh, it's on right now." Were you excited by that?
Dude, you are a nerd. What? That was the nerdiest thing I've ever heard you say.
Yeah,
Oh, it's on right now.
You weren't excited about ancient Egypt? Oh my God, I loved it. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. Yeah, maybe you're right. That is kind of nerdy, but I loved it. And it was customary for these pharaohs, right? They have children, and if they have a brother and a sister, then the law was that they should rule together. They should marry and rule together.
Yeah.
And of course, like you said, it's the idea is to consolidate power, and that works for a while. But over time, the damaging reproductive consequences start taking shape. So I mentioned King Tut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generations of sibling marriages. He comes to rule at 10 years old. He's got a cleft palate, an overbite, necrosis, oversized incisors, and a clubbed foot. And then if you know anything about the pharaoh,
Oversized incisors.
Yeah. So he's got a horrible overbite. His mouth just doesn't line up.
Gingivitis.
All of it.
Plaque buildup.
He would have had that regardless. Right. But the thing is, and he's walking around like, hey, I'm a god. They want, I'm a god. And someone has to, sleep with this person. And we'll talk about that as time goes on.
God looks weird.
God looks really weird. I wonder if that helps.
All the kids.
He looks different than everyone else. And I wonder if there was some kind of weird like beauty of
Stop looking at my god lip.
Yeah.
That's what he called it.
Or my club foot. That's hard to negotiate that as divine. My divine clubbed foot. Oh man. But I'll tell you what, 1,000 years later, Cleopatra, who is a product of incest too, but beautiful. Herodotus, all these ancient historians all classify her as extremely beautiful. And she marries her 12-year-old brother because it's the law. And she does that because she could keep power because he's 12 years old, which kind of he gets a little older and causes this civil war, and she uses the Romans to crush him. So she'll have kids with Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. So she must have been pretty good looking.
Yeah.
Right?
From what I've been told.
So what she does after she wins this civil war, she marries her 11-year-old brother. So this is, It's funny. You don't see this everywhere though, but you do see a lot in royalty, especially in Europe. And Europe is a little different because it's not the siblings, it's a lot of cousins and everything. But did you hear anything about the Hapsburgs?
Yeah, that name comes up pretty frequently when you're when you're researching inbreeding. It's kind
Yeah,
of a common name in there.
it's not just the name that comes up, it's the pictures that really sell it.
Yeah.
The illustrations. Like, and these are artist renderings. It's not like someone's taking a picture and be like, this is it. It's like this is an artist taking a picture, drawing or painting a picture, and really it's just rough.
Yeah.
So these people, they ruled Dave from 1282 to 1918. That is a good stretch.
Yeah.
And of course, just like the Egyptians, they strategically married in their family to consolidate power across Europe. So this was like, Spain,
so,
France.
Oh, okay. So that's
Yeah.
the areas. I was going to ask you what parts they were.
Everywhere. I mean, all over Europe. This is like 600 years of the Habsburgs being the most powerful family in all of Europe. And, over the centuries, it takes its toll. So they had this 50% infant mortality rate. They developed this Hapsburg jaw, which is like this huge Jay Leno kind of chin.
Yeah.
Tons of insanity, mad kings and queens. It's like this Game of Thrones vibes going. And it culminates with Charles II of Spain. Just listen to this guy's little story, right? So he in Spain, he ascends to the throne at 4 years old in 1661. So his mom's gonna be the queen regent for a while, but this guy was an absolute mess. He didn't talk till he was 4. That's probably why he waited that long. He didn't walk till he was 8. Tons of mental deficits, huge head, illiterate, impotent, one shriveled, and excuse me for being crass, diseased testicle. He had two arranged marriages, and Dave, you can imagine these poor women having to try to sleep with him. So this was like the sort of getting close to the end of the bloodline here. So they had to try to sleep with him, and this must have been horrifying for them. He's like really small. He's got a huge head. He's one of his wives was quoted as saying, "He's so ugly, it's scary." I mean, what do you say to that?
I mean, maybe it's like kind of like that effect with like dogs where like so ugly they're cute.
Yeah, I mean,
like the dogs that are missing teeth and they can't keep their tongues in.
Yeah, that is pretty cute, actually. So you think this guy Charles II was cute?
Maybe.
You would have been like, well, he's kind of cute.
That's how he was drawing in all these ladies.
His mother,
they were forced to be with him. My bad.
Yeah, his mother was his father's niece, so she's probably a little messed up too, but she thinks he's cute. And his grandmother was his aunt, so that's a little strange.
Yeah.
And what's interesting at his death is after 16 generations of inbreeding here, there was this monk who burned him, not burned him literally, but just had this great quote. And when someone was like trying to reference the cause of his death, the monk said, quote, "He was poisoned 200 years ago." It's kind of interesting, right?
Meaning like his
family,
like
grossness.
Yeah.
Was sort of what, poisoned him forever, right? I mean, just created this monstrosity, which we're going to get to later. I don't know. What do you think? It almost feels like there is something really dark about it because of what it creates. It's scary.
Well, I'm probably going to take your spotlight for a second.
Yeah,
and
please.
I just want to like clarify one of the preconceived notions that a lot of people have about inbreeding. Okay. And that preconceived notion is the idea that like inbreeding leads to deformities and mutations based on the act of inbreeding, right?
Yep.
What actually happens is, so I guess when two family members in the same bloodline,
and they love each other very much,
when they love each other and the stork comes and drops off their baby, that baby, their DNA has basically the recessive genes that would not be demonstrated if it was like when you procreate with someone out like of another bloodline, when those are usually not expressed, but when you inbreed, they become more likely to become expressed. And those recessive genes are often ones that are, or can be ones that are negative.
Right.
So
And
that's where we see the like what they would call like mutations, or like,
right.
the disabilities or the deformities, things like that. It's from those recessive genes. So actually it's like, instead of taking basically when people typically procreate, it's taking the stronger genes or the best genes. Those are usually the ones.
100%. Right.
And
It's
this
not,
one,
it's like, I guess it's like, an analogy is like the way, AIDS itself doesn't kill you. It kills your immune system, and then other things kill you.
Sure.
Right. So you're absolutely right. It's like your things that would have been selected out of your body for creation have no choice but to be selected for, because there's not enough to grab from.
Yeah. So, I mean, if your bloodline has certain disabilities or abnormalities or anything like that, it's more likely to become expressed when you have inbreeding. That
Yes.
doesn't mean it definitely is. And it doesn't mean that everybody has. I don't know. That's a good question, I guess. Does everybody have something in their bloodline that would come out that would be considered negative or like a deformity?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's like a really good idea, or it helps push the idea that like diversity is strength.
Yeah. It creates strength. It creates, I don't know how else to phrase that, but I think that's a great way to look at it. The reason we should not inbreed is because of this exact reason.
Yeah. You like, it actually brings up the blue fugates that I wasn't even sure if I was going to talk about, but the people from Troublesome Creek, Kentucky, I think we talked about it before a while back, but it came from this couple. They got married, and they weren't inbred or anything, but they both had this unknown recessive gene for this weird blood disorder that could make you blue, but neither one of them were blue. Then they moved to Kentucky, Appalachia, and the gene pool was so small that a little blue baby was born, and with a lot of ridicule and people kind of commenting on this baby's color. And I mean, honestly, it's judged by the color of your skin situation, and not wanting to be tormented by the masses. They kind of really kept to themselves. And they lived this way for 150 years. And that recessive blue gene, I mean, for lack of a better term, there was a group of people who were blue. It literally, if they had just sort of not inbred, it would have disappeared. But since they had this recessive kind of useless, shitty gene kept showing up over and over again, like you're talking about, because they're inbreeding and it has nowhere to go.
That's like the frog people of Connecticut.
Is there frog people of Connecticut?
I don't know.
We'll leave that for another episode, I guess.
Is there?
If people want to hear more about the frog people of Connecticut. So in America, there is a family who
America.
Well, here we go. Right. You're right. I'm staying in Appalachia here. I'm actually going to West Virginia, and that's to visit the Whitakers here, who are America's most inbred family. Now, I sent you a video of this because I don't think talking about it does it justice. This is what I'm talking about when I think of inbred, like the effects of it. There's this guy, Mark Laeta, and he's a photographer, and he comes upon this family in the rural mountains of West Virginia, and he says it's the craziest thing he ever saw. They speak in barks and grunts, extremely incestuous family, very little education, tough living. When you're thinking of Appalachia, you're thinking of like, this rundown shack, and like there's just stuff everywhere. Clearly physical deformities here, mental impairments for sure. It's just honestly, David, something you need to see to appreciate. Just think of like for you.
It just sounds like they're just having a great old time though.
Honestly, they're not.
Oh, all right.
And like think of the most backwoods inbred horror scene in any of the weird movies you watch, and then just imagine them hanging out on the porch during the day. It's like worse than Deliverance, worse than kind of anything you can imagine in your own mind. You have to see it, and then you say to yourself, Oh yeah, that is what I imagine when I think of inbreeding, right?
So here's my question.
Okay.
We get what happens. We get that some people do it. You mentioned a couple of reasons why some families might engage in it.
Yeah.
What benefit do the Whitakers get from engaging in inbreeding?
So I don't know it's that if that they get a benefit. I think it just is kind of one of those things where they're so isolated and it's just all they know. And it keeps them away from others. It keeps them feeling like they're a part of something. It keeps them feeling safe somehow.
Yeah.
And the more they inbreed, the less the less insight they have about the outside world. I mean, look, there's 3 remaining siblings now. They're the family, the line's gonna end, right? There's the youngest, there's 3 young boys. They're not really that young. They're kind of like in their probably 30s, right? But now their mom's deceased, and their mom and their dad at the very least had the same grandparents. So that means they were either first cousins or worst case scenario,
Yeah.
siblings, right? And honestly, it's almost I feel like a guilt when I'm watching it because it is like sideshow-esque. I mean, the level of poverty is staggering. It's like there's tough living.
Yeah.
And just I'm watching it and I'm like, why am I watching this? Am I just watching them kind of grunt at each other? And I'm just like at awe about how, they know nothing of the outside world and like how did this happen?
So
Almost.
yeah, it's interesting because it's like, does this happen because there's nobody surrounding them? Does it happen because internally they feel like nobody else would ever be interested in breeding with them? Like, it's such an interesting concept to think about why a family in modern society would still continue to do this type of behavior. And actually, after seeing a few of the, you know, offspring
Yeah.
continue to do it.
Yeah.
Isn't that an even like crazier thing to like uh try to think about? Is like you see the offspring that you've had, and then you continue to engage in that behavior, knowing that it's leading to a more and more deformed person. I hate to even use the word
I
deformed
know.
because
Well, dude,
there's
look,
other.
that's the nature of that's why I think of it as a curse. Because the 2 people that initially engage in the behavior, they have the insight to know that
Yeah.
this is not a good act. This could lead to horrible things. And they do it anyway. And then the curse is that as time goes on, the people who are a product of the curse perpetuate it without the insight, knowing that
Yeah.
we're just creating more and more of
I
damage.
guess you're right, because like if your exposure to it is like your parents have done it, and that's where you kind of look at them as like that's the model. And if you don't have other people to contrast that to show you a better version or how it was supposed to be, that would be really hard to know any difference. I guess you just engage in what you know. And
Yeah.
then the other thing that you mentioned before is the mental impairments. So that ability to really sit there and analyze, is this good behavior? Is this bad behavior? That might be lacking. And then you just continue to do it. Plus it for people that have, the deformities that they have, maybe it's just it feels good and they just do it.
Yeah, it's
That feels
like a convenience thing.
feels
Like a
horrible to even say out loud, but
yeah, it's
hey,
a
they just do what
convenience.
feels right.
Oof, I
And
know.
you're connected to your siblings. So there's an interesting thing that I've heard where most of us would at some point we hit a benchmarker, I guess. And at some point, the ability to look at our sibling in that sort of manner, and like if someone that you grew up with, you like that just kind of is not present anymore at some point. Like you would not view them in like a sexualized way. You would not have like a romantic bond with your
Right.
sibling that you grew up with.
Hopefully.
So there's some you know change in our brain at some point of growing up with a sibling that we would lose any interest in them in that kind of manner. Hopefully, like you said. But for these individuals, that clearly did not happen unless they're breeding more out of like instinct than desire. Like maybe there's
Okay.
no romantic feelings involved. Maybe there's it's more of like an instinctual reproductive.
So which if they're just acting based on their desires and their base level, they're becoming more animalistic, because it's the thing, that what separates us is our ability to say, hold on a second, let me think about this. Is this a weird thing to do? Right. And if you lose that and you're just operating on instinct and desire and those base impulses, you're almost subhuman, which is what you create after that.
Subhuman. You definitely watch Vanderpump Rules reunion. All right, Ariana.
Not recently, but it's probably in there somewhere, because damn well I watched it. You know what's funny that you're bringing up all this stuff? It's making me think of Freud and like the Oedipus complex.
Yeah.
What Oedipus was this, like, Sophocles wrote this play about this guy. He left home. See, Oedipus gets a bad rap. He left home, and then when he comes back to this kingdom, he falls in love with this woman who he doesn't know who she is, and he wants to be with her, so he kills her husband. In the end, that ends up being his dad, and he marries his mother, and he gets all these curses happen to him, right? And he has like all this like terrible luck after that. But what Freud is trying to say is that sexuality in people comes like while you're breastfeeding with your mom, right? I don't know what that says to us gentlemen who were bottle fed. I don't know if that leads me to in a different direction, but that's his idea. And he says that your dad at some point will make it clear, like you're talking about, that no, this isn't how it's going to happen. Like, she's mine. And then you develop this weird hate for your dad. And Freud thinks that we're always trying to recapture something that we really never had in the first place. And that's what kind of makes this conflict, and like, we're like lost. We thought we had this like sexual conquest, but we really didn't, because it was your mom. And the great thing about Freud is, I know it's weird, right? And that's what people are going to say too. They're going to be like, oh, that's bold claims by Freud. Once again, it's all about butts and everyone wants to sleep with their mother. But he has the ultimate disclaimer. He can say, look, I know it doesn't seem like you feel this way, and I know you're not really thinking about it like this, but it's all unconscious.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing he gets to do, which I don't know. I mean,
I thought he would always say, I know you are, but what am I? Wasn't he quoted for saying that?
Yeah, that was either Freud or Pee-wee, but it could go either way.
Very similar. Hey, so back to Oedipus.
Okay.
The end of that story, he finds out he's in a relation. He's had relations with his mother, right?
Yeah.
And then he spoons out his eyeballs and eats them.
Yeah.
That kind of fits some of this, right? So if you think about it, like I'm thinking about like the Whitakers, or maybe a story like a family like that. It's almost like Oedipus, before he realizes what his relation, like, or like why that, like, they know their relation obviously, but it's like they don't know how, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not taboo, but like the dangers of that relationship. They don't understand the level that relationship is at, and like why that's bad, and they're just engaging in it instinctively or because it feels good or whatever their rationale is, without kind of knowing the truth, right? Because that's what honestly hits Oedipus. Nothing changes for Oedipus except knowledge. And that's what causes him to react the way he does, and then he takes his eyeballs out.
Well, also, there's a connection to deformity, which is interesting.
Spooning out your eyes?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like, in a sense, he's becoming deformed. He spooned out his eyes, and that's a connection. I don't know. It's a play, so
does he
I don't know if he's trying to
continue
get
with
that
his relationship with his mom after? Does he continue the relationship with his mom after he takes out his eyes?
No.
Oh, because that would have been something too. He's like, I'm just gonna take these out, and then I'm good.
Yeah, and then like he could just say like, "Hey, no one tell me it's my mom."
See no evil. Wink, wink. Oh, I can't. I don't have eyes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that we're kind of talking about pop culture right now. Do you?
Yeah.
Do you come across any of this stuff in pop culture? Yeah, I'm sure we do. What do you got?
All right. So I heard a list of like top films for inbreeding.
Okay.
The number one film was Deliverance. The number two film was Texas Chainsaw. The number three film was The Hills Have Eyes. I think that was the order. Or it might have been Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Switch. However, to me, the top film about inbreeding, Wrong Turn, and the whole Wrong Turn franchise. Those are like iconic. Well, I say iconic, and to me, they are. Those figures are products of inbreeding, and that's like the whole storyline. There's this family, and they're like, "Stay out of our woods," but they don't say it like that. They just kill you, right? And that's that idea that you said in the very beginning. It's not about power or anything like that. For them, it's about staying to themselves.
So what? Okay, let me ask you this: what is scary about the inbred people? Like they're using them as a horror, an instrument of horror. Like, what is scary about the inbred people?
Well, for that in Wrong Turn, like obviously they look.
So
like they go heavy on like the physical looks. Like one has like a hook nose and crazy. Yeah, they're just crazy looking, and like they talk kind of funny and stuff like that. It's like it's really playing up on the idea of like the deformity and the that.
Is it because they're like other though, or is it because they don't have? It's almost known that people who have been inbred to a certain point don't have the insight.
Well, these if in Wrong Turn, they're played up like as like almost comical, and their just intent is just to kill anyone outside of the family. In the Hills Have Eyes, so that's actually like probably a better example of this because they look more normal. I mean, they all like dress like it's almost like tribal, and they're portrayed as not sophisticated, right? So like they don't have the same language, they have their own rules, they're living out in the desert, and they're scary because they have their own rules and they don't follow societal rules, right?
Exactly.
So they'll just do whatever. There's a scene, a pretty vicious rape scene in the film. They steal a baby. I think they want to eat that baby. They'll just do whatever. They kill a dog.
It's
anything goes.
Well, because if you're willing to live outside of societal norms, I guess the ultimate societal norm would be not inbreeding. That's like the number one societal norm. Like that's like day one.
Yep.
And if they're willing to break that, social rule, then they're willing to do anything. I think that's what makes them scary too.
It's funny. Texas Chainsaw got put up on that list of inbreeding films. I never really thought of it as an inbreeding film. I just thought of it as like a weird Texas family.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, I don't know why. I didn't know that was like a definite that they're like products of inbreeding. So I don't know why that necessarily is on the list.
There is a lot of mental illness with it that comes with inbreeding.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Like Leatherface himself is like clearly mentally disabled.
Yeah. Yeah,
he's a bit of a slow person. So
I read, but when you mentioned Deliverance off the top, and I read that book and saw that movie. Burt Reynolds, great. John Voight.
You have a giant poster in your bedroom of it.
Right? Yeah, that's right. The dueling banjos. Yeah. That's
you like learned that just to be able to play along with the movie. I heard.
That's right. So listen, you can picture the kid that's playing the banjo, right? You can kind of picture him.
Yeah.
So the Whitakers. I mean, you would have said if any of the three sons, the remaining sons of the Whitakers played that role, you would have said, that's a little over the top. And I'm not even kidding. Like you would have been like, wow, they're really going for it. I'm telling you, this it's something you have to check out. It's wild. It's wild. And
so how about, do you think that this exists in like, so we have this idea of like, out in the woods, this exists, but like it can happen even in suburban neighborhoods.
Yeah. So yes, it can. Ironically, something weird, something very strange is going on here. It's funny that you mentioned that at all, because I wasn't going to say anything about this, but I listened to a couple different things, and I know
it's happening in the Buttonwoods neighborhood of Cranston, isn't it?
It's not. Well, no, it's definitely not. Well, it might. I don't know, right? I can't say for sure. But what's going on, like I was listening to this podcast and there was like a panel of people talking about it. And one person mentioned that the most popular genre of porn right now is like this stepmother, stepbrother, brother, sister kind of
All the
weird.
steps.
What is it?
All the steps, step by
Yeah.
step.
So I know that's not technically, it's
Inbreeding.
taboo though.
Oh,
That's
for sure.
right. And I think that is speaking to like the laziness of kids today. And it's funny because we were kind of talking about like a proximity situation where, well, she's here now and she's my stepsister.
Yeah.
So I can play my video games and have this situation and not have to do anything or go anywhere.
At the same
And
time.
I think that's like the new kid's fantasy. It's like, oh, it just happened to fall into my lap. Like I have a new stepsister.
Well, and think about that. Like the person that probably speaks the loudest to is either they had a situation that it kind of they relate to it, or they are someone who probably has a hard time connecting with people outside of their home. So the idea of having somebody, like you said, in close proximity is probably the most appealing thing ever, because then like it's there for me and like I don't have to go out and into the real world and try to connect with someone, and that's like torture, or I have a hard time doing it, or I just can't do it. Right.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting that that's the new fantasy.
And that's that idea that I was saying is like, with inbreeding, is there a part of it that's just like, well, this is convenient? It's like,
yeah,
it's like,
there really is.
Yeah. I mean,
it really is.
I think that could be a part of it. It is. And that's the other thing. Like, I think that what we're seeing, because I mean, right from the jump, you said like, there's a few ways that some families kind of like utilize it. I think that's the thing with it in general, is there's a lot of different reasons, I guess, that it happens. It's not just one reason.
So it's interesting what you brought up initially is like, so when did this become taboo? Was it just upon understanding like the medical consequences, or is there something that did people intrinsically know that there was something wrong about this, or did it have to be learned? Is there a way to answer that?
I think about this kind of stuff all the time. Like for things that, and not in like with, I'm not you, not with inbreeding. Just like things in general that are considered taboo or that we'll like feel so strongly about. And I think one of the things that's really even gotten me thinking more about it is the story of Christmas. So just what was the other one that started as a pagan holiday and then the Catholic Church came in?
Like all of them, but Valentine's Day is
I think like that
Halloween
makes me think about this stuff even more. It's like at some point the Catholic Church came in and said, we want to take this over, so we're going to tell you it's wrong, and then we're going to put our own spin on how it's going to look going forward. So is that kind of the same with some of these things? But then there's like I said, there's some things that seem innate to humans that kind of tell us it's wrong. So like I said, that study about at some point we would lose all ability to have attraction to our sibling that we grew up with. Like that's biological. That's not
100%. That's why I think if the church was against this, I think they got this one right. When there's like a biological component, they've got it right. Like they even say,
unless it's not biological, and maybe unless you lose that because you're programmed, conditioned, programmed to believe that. But if it's like truly a feeling that I'm no longer, then that is biological, right?
Well, no, here's the thing though. Think about that guy, Charles II. He was a product of like 16 generations of inbreeding. And that inbreeding in and of itself created a situation where he becomes impotent and no longer able to pass down. It would just, if we were all inbreeding, which I guess at some point we had to be, right? If you're just starting from a few of us, right?
That just reminded me of something that I heard that I was like, I never thought of it that way. Adam and Eve.
Okay, well, if you're gonna, okay, yeah.
How did people procreate? Like, how did people become? How were people created without them procreating?
But wait, are you going with like we're using that as like science?
Were they? No, like we were talking about I might have just had a thought and then thought we were in the middle of that conversation. We were talking about like you had said it previously though, that it's even in the Bible, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I guess some people have questioned, like, well, how are people even created beyond Adam and Eve without them procreating?
Right. So it had to be okay at some point. And then
But
in the
then-
Bible, they had to be like, all right, well, that's enough of that.
But they've also kind of explained it away in other ways that I think could probably be like challenged. So it's another conversation that could be had.
So there's two ways to make me think. So eventually, if you were inbreeding right now and you were keeping it inside your family for a year, generation,
Which I'm not.
which you're not, I
Jeez.
know, you would fail to procreate after a while. So that in and of itself, like it's like the point of being human is procreating, like making other humans. So if you can't do that anymore, then that's not the right way to be a human.
Yeah.
Right. And also there's this thing where people think that, when teenagers stop listening to their parents, they're like, no, my parents are an idiot and I don't like them and they don't know anything.
I've never had that thought, Greg, only you.
I think
I'm sorry for your parents.
It's this thing that happens genetically to all of us because that's our body's way of saying, get the hell away from your parents.
It's called middle school and we think we know it all.
That's right. It's called get the hell away from your parents. Like you'll listen to that middle school teacher or like that your friend's dad.
Yeah.
Like I think this happens a lot more with women, they say. But you don't trust your parents anymore. You don't like them. You think they're embarrassing and you want to get away from them.
Wait, what did you say? It happens more with what?
With the females.
They listen to their friend's dad more?
Well, hopefully not. But they stray from their parents at teenage.
Aww.
So that it's good because it prevents inbreeding.
Okay.
That's the the idea anyway. So anyways, here's another thing, right? Whenever I'm thinking about the people in Appalachia, like people were saying they're savages and they're inbred and all these other things, right? There's something insidious there where you make a story up about people, and if it's pervasive enough and if it seeps into the consciousness enough, it like sort of becomes true because these Whitakers and these Fugates, they are inbred from Appalachia. So what came first? Like people telling stories of this or these things actually happening?
Probably the things actually happening, I would assume.
Yeah.
I would hope that they didn't hear the story and be like, hey,
that's a good well, I mean,
we should have done that.
But I feel like that does happen, like as like
the frog people of Connecticut.
Exactly. Like we're not sociologists, but I feel like if you tell a story about a certain culture over time, it'll seep in and maybe people would just perpetuate that.
Yeah. Greg, have you ever seen the frog people of Connecticut?
No, I don't even know what you're talking about.
That's how we know they exist because they stay to themselves. If you had seen one, I would have been like, they don't exist.
I think that I like this idea. And you might be creating, just by talking about some things, you might be creating them and thinking about them.
They have giant eyes and they're mostly on like the sides of their heads.
Yikes.
Yeah. I forget.
I don't like that.
It is. But you're not going to see them. They stay in their home.
Can I tell you something about the Southerners in general? Slaveholders were inbreeding. Did you know that?
Really?
Yeah, because they wanted to preserve whiteness in the South.
Wow.
I know, and that's gross, right? And it probably made them even more monstrous and scary. It's just, and I think remembering this thing that like this as it goes on, the genetics and the maladaptations and just the deformities get worse and worse and worse as it goes on.
It reminds me of like Pet Sematary, where he already had buried his son, and that went first the cat, and that went wrong. Then the son, and that went wrong. But it's like then his wife, and he's like, I think I'm gonna get it right this time.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, all right. No, you're not.
You're definitely not.
You're not.
So you know what I'm thinking about right now? And here's we missed two, I think, when it came to pop culture. We kind of like skipped over that a little bit. But one is Cormac McCarthy wrote this great book, Hour Dark, which I really love. And it starts off with inbreeding right away. Okay. And it's set in this like weird dark time. But here's an unknowable question. Sloth from the Goonies. Was he inbred?
Who's his daddy and who's his mom?
I don't know, but he certainly looks like something's going on.
I think that he might just have some kind of disabilities, Greg. I don't think everybody's just inbreeding out there.
All right.
I know that's where your mind goes when you see.
You never know. You never know, and that's one for.
Don't ever share your disabilities with Greg, because he will immediately
Inbred.
Yeah,
Inbred. I knew it. Well, Dave, I don't know if there's much more to say about this. I mean, do you have anything?
I feel like you have a lot more to say about it, though.
I could probably talk about it forever, but I think that, just mentioning what we have here with royalty and with sort of the opposite of royalty.
Yeah.
And just kind of shows that it's interesting that you don't find it in the middle.
What do you mean?
So, I mean, like, the poorest of the poor.
Yeah, but you know what? Is that a product of what happens? Does it either goes one way or the other? It's like, yeah, well, when you're already a family with power, obviously you're not going to lose that power until you're challenged or something happens to cause you to lose the power. So the inbreeding just continues the family name.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's still problematic if there's disabilities that are happening with the offsprings, or the other way, if you don't have power and you do that, eventually you're going to have a bunch of people don't know how to take care of themselves, or and they living conditions, or they're just like doing bare minimum for themselves, and then they are gonna eventually look how you described before in all right, listen, conditions.
I've got it right here. I figured it out on this little yellow pad. So what you're talking about, you're making me think here. What you just described there, I thought that the reason why the royals did it and the poor in Appalachia did it were completely different opposing reasons. But the reasons why they did it are exactly the same. And it's from lack of trust, not willing to be vulnerable. And that's how you become weak. So think of a tree, right? If it's growing, it needs to shoot out all these little green sprouts. It needs to become vulnerable. And then when it does that, and if it works out, the tree is bigger than it ever could be. They were both afraid to become vulnerable, and that made them weak. That made them stay where they are. That made them not grow. It made them. They were just not trustworthy. The royals didn't want to marry outside of their family because they didn't trust that they could, trust somebody in Spain or trust somebody in Italy, whatever. And the people in the poor Appalachian villages or communities or whatever, they were afraid of trusting other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really is this inability to become vulnerable and trust somebody else, which is essentially what we need to do to create communities, create civilizations, and thrive as human beings.
Well, you have to integrate.
You have to integrate.
You can't isolate. It reminds me of like week 1 or 2 of when you first tried to grow back your mustache. You had to a few hairs started to sprout. You had to be vulnerable with that. And then look how strong you became when it fully grew out.
That's not even a joke, dude. That is a great metaphor. because I had to become vulnerable. I had to have they were like, oh, look at this guy's got a little dirt on his lip. Or this guy can't even grow a mustache. Can you grow a mustache? Someone said to me, and I said, can I grow a mustache? And I have to flip through my phone and show them pictures. Of course.
Oh my God. Of course that's embarrassing. You had to show them.
It is embarrassing.
And the fact that you had selfies on your phone.
Dave, I love it when these things happen where we actually found a point to talk about one of these dumb things that I wanted to talk about. And it's true. This is a great metaphor for why we are, what it means to be a strong community, a strong human. And you're right. We have to integrate. We have to put ourselves out there, and diversity, and be around other people. And that's what makes us strong.
And not to make a bigger meaning out of this than it needs to, but think about some of the things that we complain about today with kids, right? They're constantly on electronic devices. They're constantly home. They're not being as social. What could that lead to? Dun, dun,
isolation.
Dun.
Inbreeding.
Yikes. You hear that, everybody? Get your kids outdoors.
Get out of the house.
Get out now.
Put
your headphones in, listen to our podcast, and talk to your friends.
Go for a walk, for God's sake.
Listen to our podcast while you're walking.
Yeah, and rate it and review it, please. Because that doesn't take much time.
All right. So Greg, great way to start off the November month. Great way to break up the spookiness of the last 5 weeks that we did. That was a lot of Tuesdays in October. So
It was a lot, yeah.
Yeah. So you wanted something a little lighter, and here you go.
I don't think this was it.
Is inbreeding. Oh, that's awesome.
It might be the darkest, one of the darker topics, I think.
So just for like forewarning, this month is going to be heavy on Greg topics because I owe him for entertaining me last month, because I think I might have dominated the topics last month, so I'm going to let Greg dominate the topics this month.
I actually enjoyed last month, though.
Hey, because they were great.
They were great topics. And look, who's to say? I think that most might say Greg's not off to a great start. You know what I mean? I'm not exactly off to the races here with inbreeding. Hey, we had to get it. We had to do it, right?
We're not here to judge you, Greg. We're just here to laugh at you.
Listen, these are the things that people want to know. Like, why is this happening? We ask why. That's what we do.
You know what I love that we enjoy doing is we take a month and we look at like, oh, what's big in that month, and then how can we put our own spin on it, which is kind of like what we're going to do this month. So we decided November was family-oriented month. So let's do inbreeding. Hopefully that we're not distasteful for the rest of the month with some of the other topics we're going to do. So just bear with us, and we have some doozies and some intriguing ones, and it's a nice for a little variety. So I hope that you guys enjoy them.
I'm ready for it, Dave. Yeah,
Greg,
I'm ready.
Good job today with your research and your forever knowledge of inbreeding. You did really good. You really impressed us with how much you know about inbreeding.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
All right. And everybody, thanks for listening. And thank you for just being super supportive and, awesome. And we love you. And Greg wrote a poem that he's going to read to you guys.
A haiku. I'll get back to you on that. I'm still working on the king.
Next week.
Yeah.
Be ready for that. And we'll talk to you later. Have a great night, a great week, a great life. Peace out.